Hello, I'd like to begin with the fact that this happened to me years ago, and the reason I'm posting this only now is because I was ashamed of this story and I never told anyone. For the longest time, I thought I was the only one who went through this experience and that no one would believe me. But as I mentioned, it's been a few years. In fact, more than a decade. I am happily married, have two beautiful children, a decent job, and my wife is a great mother and stood by me in some hard times. Where most women would leave, she stuck by me and even took the reins when I couldn't continue. I consider myself lucky and grateful after seeing so many marriages fail. Before I go into my heroine story, I'd like to give you context of where I'm from and where I was in my life leading to this psycho. I'm a European, Asian, and African descendant, and I live in North Africa. I am white, well-built, and never had a problem getting a girl I liked. I had dates, one-night stands, and two incidents where I found out I was the mistress to some other guy's girlfriend. Both times, I ended it and called the boyfriends and told them what had happened. See, I have a code. Never sleep with another man's wife. Be honest and straightforward. Never compromise me. In 2003, I had to do my military service. In my country, you can't attest your high school diploma if you don't complete it. My father didn't have a wasta or connections to get me out of it. I told him not to worry and that I'd do. It was hard, but I completed it. When I graduated, I received my Army ration card, certification, and documents. At home, I spent time recuperating and sharing stories. We laughed, cried, and cursed. But my father and brother were proud of me. My mother wasn't in the picture for a long time, in case you're wondering. That's another long story I won't get into. My father raised us as a single father, and he did his best. I'll leave it at that. A few months later, I began to apply for universities. During the time, I found a good university in India, Pune, and thought, why not? Once I was accepted, my dad gave me his blessing, some money, and off I was. To carve a path. It's 2005 now. I was studying for a bachelor's in arts and picked up 2 courses in animation just for fun. I also found a job as a tattoo artist, which wasn't paying at first, but once I passed my apprenticeship, I was making a lot of money for a 19-year-old. I was also a breakdancer, which afforded me access to clubs, free drinks, and a bunch of gigs with fashion TV shows, club openings, and I even once did a dance for a big saloon in the city. I was quite popular, and life was great. It was great until 2007. That's when I met the most manipulative, cheating, lying psychopath to ever walk on the face of this rotating sphere we call Earth. I still kick myself to this day thinking about it. There were so many red flags. Psycho was in a group of circles I knew. It was at a club, and I approached a friend whom she knew, and we started talking to him. The music was loud, so my friend and I stepped out to the balcony to talk and get a break. It was probably a few minutes when my ex and her friend followed. They sat with us, and my friend introduced me to them. Now my ex is nothing special. She was below average, chubby, and was loud. I had no interest in her at the time. She did have an outgoing personality. After a long chat and a bunch of rum in my system, that would make a pirate with one wooden leg wobble like a scarecrow on a windy Tuesday. I excused my drunk arse and sailed right back home with enough shanties sung to make a sequel to Assassin's Creed, Black Flag. A few nights later, I bumped into her at the same club. She kept coming up to me and told me a yo mama joke. Writing that now, it's clear she was into me even, but at the time, I didn't realize this. I smiled at her lame jokes, and she had my attention. I humored her, knowing that yo mama joke wasn't considered appropriate in India, but she was an Indian who was really into it. Her jokes weren't funny. Mine made all her friends laugh. The third time we met was at a different club. She came up to me and asked me if I had a drink. I told her I had a few, and I'm only downing beers because I had to be somewhere early the next day. I socialized here and there. Danced with a chick. I was about to pay my tab when my ex popped up and asked me to buy her a drink. She really wanted my attention. I got her one, paid my tab, and said goodbye. As I was getting on my bike, I heard her calling my name. When I turned, I saw that she was alone and that her better-looking friend was leaving with another guy. Her better-looking friend had a boyfriend at the time. That guy wasn't him. If I knew that at the time, I would have found a way to tell him that his girlfriend was out sampling. She walked up to me and told me her friend was leaving and that they had no room for her. At this point, I'm sure you noticed a few red flags. The clubs, the way she seeks attention, forcing me to buy her a drink, her friend being a S-word, etc. I didn't notice any of that. Mind you, I had plenty of dates. I just don't know why I didn't spot it at the time. She tells me she has no ride home and that she had to wait a few hours for her friend to come get her. I should have said too bad. But I'm too kind at heart and didn't want to leave her outside a club of all places. I told her I had a busy day tomorrow and that I can't drop her home because it was too far. That I can drop her at a 24 hours cafe next to my flat. She agreed. As soon as I parked my bike at the cafe, she asked me if I'd walk her in so no guys would hit on her. I thought to myself who would, before rejecting and assuring her that it was a safe establishment and that the owner knows me, and he wouldn't allow it. She insisted that I at least come in and tell the owner. I hesitated, then relented and walked her in. A group of my friends were there, and upon seeing me whistled and cheered as if I scored a goal in the last 30 seconds of a football match. She liked it and asked if we should say hi. Reluctantly, I nodded but made sure she saw my displeased face. A close friend was drunk and grabbed me. Started to tease and winked at her, suggesting that she got lucky and that she shouldn't eat too much, that she'll need the space for later tonight. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I was getting irritated and all I can think of was waking up early. This is where I think she got determined to sleep with me. Me laughing might have been a sign. After that, she was all over me, hugging my arm and running her fingers. An hour ran by, and she started texting. That was my cue. I got up and said my goodbyes and left, only to be followed. I told her that her friend wasn't going to make it, that she was probably asleep with that guy she left with. She just nodded. I asked if she had money. She shook her head. I told she can crash on the sofa. She hooped on my bike and held me tightly. Tighter than before. We got home, I turned on the lamp by the door, pointed at the sofa, and went straight to my room to get sheets and a blanket. She followed me, but I was quicker. As she entered my room, I handed her the sheets and directed her to the bathroom. I wished her a good night and proceeded to bed, throwing my clothes hurriedly. I promise you I had no intentions whatsoever. But when you wake up to a mouth landing on your pole, you'd let it happen too. I don't know how long it lasted. I painted her mouth only seconds after waking up. She laid next to me, I thanked her. She asked if I had a condom and round two commenced. In the morning, I woke her up and told her that I had to go. She was welcome to have breakfast with me and my friends before we part ways. The restaurant my friends and I frequented was Iranian. I would like you to remember this place for later. We got there, greeted my friends, had breakfast, paid for both our meals, and said goodbye to my friends. I walked her to the rickshaw stand, gave her some money and then some. Thanked her for the night and parted ways. I didn't realize at the time that this was a nightstand that would last approximately 7-8 months. We hooked up a few times and started to become more intimate and slowly more exclusive. One day, my friends who knew her ex's previous boyfriend approached me and started to tell me about her previous relationship. They were concerned, but I told them I wasn't concerned with her past. But they insisted. I knew they weren't ones to gossip. So, I listened. Basically, she cheated on her boyfriend multiple times with different guys. After they broke up, she continued her serial cheating and slept with someone else I knew. Her roommate was also there that night, and they had a threesome. Her other friend, who left the club with another guy, also had a boyfriend, and she too was sleeping around. It was so unbelievable that I thought they were kidding. I slept around too, but never at the rate of these girls. I got angry and I confronted her later. I told her everything. Oh, she was so intelligent, and I was naive. She spun her web of lies, and I just didn't have proof to dispute it. I don't know why I had to proof it. I should have listened and ran for the hills. This was the biggest red flag, but I believed her. Soon after, another red flag started popping up. She was really insecure. It is without any exaggeration the turning point in my life. It caused me to isolate more often, and I wasn't the outgoing man I used to be. Her insecurities were a clear sign that she was cheating. First, she didn't like that I had so many female friends. Then she didn't want me to hang out around other girls. Later it became unreasonable. Here are two examples I remember. Once at the end of a long night of partying, we were outside the club. I promise you I was never in a bike gang, but my friends and I always left together. We are all foreigners after all, and none of us had families in India. We all left at the same time and checked on each other via text. So, there we were, on our bikes, when one of the other girls who was prettier than my ex approached me. My ex was behind me on my bike, and the girl asked me if we had any after-party plans. I looked around at my friends and told her that we were calling it a night. That she should ask the guy, and I pointed at my Sudanese friend. He was single and I knew he liked her. She thanked me and made a beeline straight to him. They hooked up that night, and they're married now with 2 Sudanese Dutch boys who will break many hearts one day. My ex was furious and accused me of having an affair. I told her that she was insecure, and the reason why she is insecure was because she couldn't keep her legs closed, and that she assumes I'm a hoe too. She wasn't pleased. Today, I think she didn't argue back because she wasn't sure if I was guessing or I knew something. Truth is, I had a gut feeling. But I had to proof it before making accusations. I should have just left. The second example is one I wish I actually went through with it. Again, we were at a club. There was a Russian or Eastern European chick who was gorgeous. But she too was sampling rods on a daily basis. I guess it was my turn that night. We were on the dance floor, and she was staring at me. I noticed it, and it was intense. She was graceful and glided towards me. She stopped halfway, extended her arms, and began to gesture her open palms to come closer. I wish I did. But I gently shook my head and cordially took a step back with and smile. The guys busted out laughing and gestured a whipping sign at me. My ex saw this and stormed out. My friends broke into laughter, and so did I. I clearly and respectfully rejected her. Yet, my ex still found a reason to get mad. See, at this point, I knew she wanted a reason to leave. That's what these types of women do. They make you think that you are the problem, so they can storm out, sample other men, then come back. But she was smarter than I. I did mention earlier that she was intelligent. That is what I thought at the time, but I was catching on. My instincts were right, and I was an emotional wreck. At this point, she was cheating on me very frequently. I didn't know who, I didn't know where, when, or even how she kept eluding me. But it seemed to be whenever she went to her so-called aunt. She never had any of the guys' numbers that I suspected. She was saving them under girls' names. I was determined to find out. But she was always one step ahead of me. Like she knew what I was going to do and when. It was baffling. So begins the abuse. This time it was as clear day. She disappeared, and I had no idea where she was. I called her, she didn't pick up. I went to her friend's house, and they seemed very worried and hesitant to talk to me. They weren't worried that she disappeared, it was because I started a manhunt. I told them that they were all pieces of SHT for hiding something. They told me that I could do better than her. In fact, all her SLTY friends always said that to me. However, this was the first time I understood what they meant by it. It's true, you know, thieves have no honor amongst themselves. Guess it applies to hoes as well. These were her friends after all. I left. My ex came later to my house, and I started to question her. She was evasive. Then I told her that I had no place in my heart for slut, that she should keep her legs closed. When I turned to face her, I got a slap. It didn't hurt physically. I didn't know how to react. I got flashbacks of my dad slapping my mom. It was humiliating. I just stared at her, with tears in my eyes. I was holding back a rage I never felt before. My knees trembled as I tried to hold back the urge to strike back. I swore to never be that man. I walked away, locked my room, and began to sob hysterically. It had nothing to do with being scared or feeling weak. I cried because I felt that I was going insane, and I couldn't prove anything, and I had no control. It was at this moment I began to isolate and dread meeting others. Coupled with the holidays that would lead to the next semester and having more free time because I completed the diplomas, all of that didn't help. My ex was traveling out of state to visit her parents. This meant I had time to reflect on my life and the SHT I found myself in. Once I was alone soul-searching. I remembered something my ex kept screaming about in one of our many fights. I don't recall what his was now, but what I do remember was coming to a realization that someone from my group of friends was telling my ex everything I was up to. It dawned on me that she was always ahead of me because some bastard was snitching on me, which always led to me failing in catching her in the act. I knew exactly which group of friends. But there were only two I suspected. Remember H? The guy who introduced me to her? Remember that Iranian restaurant? Well, something I didn't mention was when I kept encountering her. H approached me one day and asked if something was going on between us. I told him that there was nothing. He told me he wanted to F her, to which I said, go for it. Then the whole buy me a drink, my friend is leaving me, and walk me in night happened. When I walked in with her to have breakfast at that Iranian restaurant, H was there, and he couldn't hide his anger. I told him later what had happened, and everything seemed fine. Or so I thought. He saw it as a betrayal, even when I told him that we weren't exclusive. He must have really resented me for that. He never showed it. H was also the person I suspect the most. My ex knew a lot, and I began to grow more convinced that H and my ex were talking behind my back. I had to know for sure. I just didn't know how. In search of a mole, days go by and my ex and I break up once again over the phone. Oh, we broke up so many times. This time, I meant it. So, I went through my phone and looked through my contacts to find a girl I had been thinking about a lot and never had the chance to see it through. Surprisingly, not only did she answer my call, but she was very willing to come over and catch up. Not going to lie, it boosted my confidence tremendously. She came over and our conversation was very tensed. It was very flirty, and it was clear that she had you-know-what intentions. I had almost forgotten how it felt to be so solely aroused. The SEAL tension between us kept building up till it blew up with us having the most savage sex I've ever had. We were like animals who were both caged, and I felt the walls were sweating from the heat we radiated. When it was all over, we held each other tightly and began to talk. I asked why it took us so long to hook up. She gave me a puzzled stare. Told me she always knew that I was out of her league. I got upset and told her I was into her the night we met. She spent the night, and all I can say is that the sweaty walls were starting to look more like a waterfall throughout the night. In the morning we said our goodbyes. I knew for some reason that she needed this more than I did. That she wasn't going to call me again, and I was okay with it. I learned years later that she was going through something similar to me at the time, which just made so much sense and put a lot of things into perspective. Later that day, I met a friend who suspected of snitching. I told him half the story. That I met someone and rekindled an old flame. But that we didn't have sex because I wanted to get closure before moving on. I told him that her name Priyanka. It wasn't. I met H later and told him the whole truth, but changed her name to Radhika. I do want to acknowledge one person before I continue. He wasn't a close friend. He was someone I bumped into on many occasions through circles for friends. This was obviously before I dated that psychopath. Anyway, this man once looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Dude, what the F happened to you?" You used to walk into the room and make people want to be around you. That sentence hit me hard. It was when the abuse got really bad, and I took it because the alternative was to become my dad. That conversation might have been weeks before my ex left the state and the Savage SX with Priyanka Radhika. Things were looking up after the savagery. I was starting to socialize once again. I wasn't in touch with any girls but my roommate. I didn't want to start anything yet. Not until I got over my ex. Boy, was I in for a rude awakening? I had no idea that somewhere, thousands of feet in the air, were my ex heading straight to my city like a sandstorm, swarming with the most foul and decrepit intentions to ruin me. How could I have known that Helmut Zemo would look like a children's book's antagonist compared to what was getting off that plane? My phone rings and my heart starts pounding. The caller ID is my ex. I answer it and she tells me that she wants to come over to talk. I know, I should have said no. But I needed to know the truth. The door knocks and I let her in. I'm holding back my anger now and I want to know everything. We greet each other and I start to ask her questions. She dodges them and seems more interested about what I was up to. I play dumb and persist to ask who she is sleeping with. She keeps turning the topic on me and really wanted to know what I've been up to. I tell her that I'm socializing with other guys and I'm hurting from her betrayal. She tells me I have only blind accusations and that I have nothing. I tell her that I don't need any, that I know she is a cheating maggot, and I don't need proof of it. I don't need to know who, why, where, or her effing reasons. That all I know is that even her SLUTY friends think I deserve better. I then proceeded to lie and state as the matter of fact that it was her friends who told me everything. Her face twisted. I swear that BITCH wanted to know which one. Before she could utter a word, the lie again and say, all of them. She paused, then looked at the ceiling. I knew it was coming. She wanted to attack me. She raised her arm and told me to give her the motorcycle keys. I give her a confused look. She tells me that she is leaving. I tell her that I paid for it and that the lease was under my name. I knew her broke arse good for nothing leeching parasite would ask for the keys. Her face turned red, and she pounced at me. Not this time. I grabbed her arm, twisted it behind her back, and walked her straight to the door. She shouted and screamed. I opened the door and with one hand thrusted her fat arse out. She trips and turns to me with the most shocked face I have ever seen on her. It didn't suit her well. I think this is when she realized I was done with her. I stood up to her. I enjoyed her new look. I leaned forward and told her, never again will I allow you to lay your hands on me. You confuse my kindness for weakness. You knew that I despised men who hit women and you abused me knowing I would be defenseless. You are nothing without me. I own everything, I earn everything. Take your broker off my floor and be gone. Remember, I could have done worse. It was something like that. It might have been longer with more of anger than calm. As I stepped back, she tells me she knows about Radhika. I smiled and told her I know. I made sure I told your best friend all the details. I hope your mouth doesn't land on his DK accidentally again. I gently closed the door. What came next was a shriek. I couldn't stop grinning. I went to my room and spent my day listening to music and for the first time, enjoy the peace of mind. So, I thought. Oh, did I mention that we were a psychopath? Well, here it comes. Guess who calls me a few hours after I kicked out my now so deservedly called ex? It was H. I answer and he began to shout in hysteria. He tells me that he'll whoop my arse. I responded with when and where motherfucker, silence. He tells me about his place in 1 hour. I told him it was a date. I ride to his place and his girlfriend rushes out begging me to go home. I shout towards her door, sending your girlfriend to me, coward. He comes out, red in the face. I take off my helmet, shirt, belt and showed him my palms. He knew what it meant. He did the same. When we both knew that we're keeping it clean, I lunged in him. He landed one square in my face. I don't have any recollection of the fight. All I remember was me trying to slow my breath as I laid on the floor. I looked up to see his girlfriend looking down elsewhere. I turned to see that he is out of breath too. I could see his face and eyes were swollen. I was scared. I went into a blind rage. My best friend was on the ground beside me, but all I felt was betrayed and a loathing for this man. My chest was heavy. But I managed to turn to him. I asked if he was still alive. He opens one eye and tells me that I fought like a girl. My lungs were hurting now. I asked him if there was anything else he wanted to say. He scoffed. I get up and his girlfriend passes me my stuff. I think she felt sorry for me. I think she knew what he did, and she didn't approve. I thanked her. Told her to put him to bed and not to put ice, so that everyone can see what happened. I went back home, had a shower, and went to bed. I didn't sleep much and cried all night. I lost a friend, and nothing could change it now. I fall asleep and woke up the next day even more sore. Luckily my face had a few scratches, but my knuckles were red, black, and blue. I had to do a surgery to fix my thumb with 2 platinum needles. When the doctor told me I needed surgery, and it was really bad, I finally got to say, "You should see the other guy." There were no lawsuits. We had a fair and square fight, and in truth, none of us gained anything from it. I started dating a few months and heard from H's brother that night when I fought his brother, my ex landed her mouth on some other guy's Johnson and he too allowed it. This was another friend from my home country and I had no bad feelings about it. I was glad she was out of my life and he had no reason to say no. This same friend got into a horrible accident sometime later while riding his scooter. Again, we are all foreign students and we have to stick together. I go to the hospital only to learn that he was in a coma and that the hospital won't lift a finger until they get paid. We all chipped in, and the surgery goes well. We all took turns watching over him and getting his medication. He woke up 9 days later. My ex, now his girlfriend, never came to the hospital to see him. H was there, but we both had other concerns. When he finally woke up, H and his brother were there and told him what had happened. I visited later. When I saw him, I told him that I heard he tried to break an electric pole with his head. It is funnier in our language. When he was discharged, I got a call from H. He told me we needed to talk. We met at a restaurant by my flat, and what he told me made my jaw drop. The night of the accident, my ex was fighting with her BF and forced him to go out and buy alcohol. He was already too drunk to be riding. When he got into the accident, she somehow, on that very night with no remorse, managed to land her mouth on some other guy's Johnson. Knowing all the while it was her fault that he went out in the first place. H apologized and told me he had no idea what kind of wretched filth my ex was. I told him that all was forgiven. We remained friends, but understandably never close. You would think it's over and that's the end of it. It was for me. A new beginning. One night, H's ex-girlfriend calls. She too was cheated on by him. She is not the same girl that tried to stop us from brawling. NG was the previous girlfriend. She asked me if I wanted to get together with her and a friend for drinks and BTCH about our exes. I thought it was a great idea. We met at a bar, and we never brought up the exes. We had a great time, and we went out for the club. Little did I know that this MSNG here was playing matchmaker. It is all thanks to her I met who I now call my wife. My right hand, the one who would stand up by me, mother of my children. We would marry 4 years later and build a home together. She even put herself once between me and a guy who wanted to shoot me with his AK. We've been together now for 15 years, and we have an inside joke that our children look so much like me that we suspect my wife isn't the mother. As for my ex, she made a few attempts to break us up and get back with me once she realized no one wanted to be with her and everyone knew the truth. I found out some time later that the night I kicked her out, she went to her friend's place, smashed her face in the mirror, tore her clothes, and walked out barefoot. She went to H's place and claimed I did it to her. but her own friend ratted her out when she found out what she was trying to do. My ex also tried to become my wife's friend back when we were dating. I had finished uni and had to go to complete my 6-month compulsory military service after uni. NG warned my wife at the time and all was safe. When I returned to India after my service to do my master's, my wife and I became exclusively together. My ex was enraged. One night while out clubbing, my ex and one of her SLUT friends kept walking by me, laughing as loud as possible. My girlfriend, my friends, and I looked at each other. She really wanted my attention. She sent a long text message later that night, blaming me for everything and how I broke her heart. I just blocked her. A few days later, she appeared at my doorstep, pretending that she forgot something at my place. I told her that my girlfriend was asleep and that she wasn't welcomed. She went on a tangent, something about how I deserved more and that my girlfriend was laughing at me with her friend. A feeble attempt, and I shut the door at her. In 2011, February, I head back to my home country to get things ready. My girlfriend and I were about to tie the knot and she were getting ready to move to my country. I let everyone know the wedding date. Here was my ex's last try. Out of nowhere she calls me. It was an Indian number I didn't know. I answered and it was her. She informed me her father passed away and I offered my condolences. I never met her father in person, but we got along great on the phone. We spoke about her father and what led to his demise. Anyway, a week later she calls again. I think she found out that I was getting married, and she made her last-ditched effort. She congratulated me, turns 180 degrees, and begs me not to marry her. Her last words to me were, "She doesn't even get your jokes." I said, "Well, I guess you'll never get to hear the punchline then." I hung up. That was the last I ever spoke to her. She tried adding me on social media via proxy accounts. But I don't add people I never met in person. Just so you know, I omitted a lot. Things like her making fake accounts during our relationship to see if I would cheat, learning my passwords and messaging my female friends nasty things and ruined my friendships, stalking my dates, getting close to people I held close and dear, telling them lies and making me out to be a horrible person, and so on. I hope this story helps other men struggling. If you were to ask me how to spot a red flag, I'd tell you not to even look. If you suspect something and you feel it, dump her. If something changes, don't try to find out, just leave. Thank you for reading me story. Feel free to ask anything.